Welcome to the History in Focus channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one.
Hollywood took the Wild West and turned it into a backdrop of white hats, blonde damsels, and clean shootouts in the middle of the street. The real history was something else. Outlaws became shoes for governors. Families murdered guests with hammers. Bounty hunters propped corpses against walls for photographs. 42 bizarre facts about the Wild West you did not know. Brace yourself. Some of these will surprise you. Fact number 1. Big-nosed George Parrot, the outlaw who became a pair of shoes. On March 22, 1881, a mob dragged George Parrot from the jail in Rawlins, Wyoming, and hanged him from a telegraph pole. He had killed 2 lawmen while trying to rob a train. When the mob was done with him, the body had no owner. The local doctor, John Osborne, took the corpse for study. That is when the story unfolded. Osborne sawed off the top of the skull, claiming to study the criminal brain. He gave the piece to his assistant, Lillian Heath, who used it as an ashtray for years. Lillian would later become the first female doctor in Wyoming. The skin from the chest was sent to a tannery in Denver. It came back as a pair of shoes. In 1893, Osborne was sworn in as the Democratic governor of Wyoming. According to the story, he wore the shoes at the inauguration. They are in the town museum. Fact number 2. The Benders, the family that murdered guests with hammers. Between 1871 and 1873, at an inn on the Osage Trail in Kansas, a family of German immigrants received travelers: father, mother, son, John Jr., and daughter Kate. The room had a curtain dividing the front from the back. Kate would invite the guest to sit at the head of the table, leaning against the curtain, and make conversation while he dined. Behind the curtain, someone waited with a hammer. A blow to the back of the head knocked the man down. They cut the throat to make sure, threw the body in the cellar. They took money, jewelry, and horse, buried them in the orchard behind the house. The scheme worked for 2 years without anyone suspecting. In May of 1873, when a doctor disappeared along the route, neighbors forced the house open. They found at least 11 bodies buried in the orchard, all with crushed skulls. The Benders had already fled. Rewards, raids, expeditions. They were never found. Fact number 3. Elmer McCurdy, the outlaw who worked 65 years after dying. On October 7, 1911, in Oklahoma, McCurdy was killed in a shootout with police after robbing a train by mistake. He only got $46 and 2 bottles of whiskey. The body went to a funeral home in Pawhuska. Nobody showed up. The undertaker embalmed the corpse with arsenic, dressed it as an outlaw, and started charging a coin from the curious who came to see the outlaw who would not give up. 5 years later, 2 men claimed to be relatives and took the body. It was a lie. The corpse entered the circuit of traveling fairs, horror parks, and roadside shows. It changed owners several times. They forgot it was a person. In December of 1976, crew members of a TV show were filming at a park in Long Beach, California. One of them grabbed the arm of a hanging mannequin. The arm broke off. Human bone appeared. It was McCurdy, 65 years on display before finally being buried. Fact number 4. Alfred Packer, the man who ate 5 companions in the snow. In November of 1873, Packer was guiding 5 prospectors through the San Juan Mountains in Colorado. He was 31 years old. A blizzard caught them in the dead of winter near Lake Slumgullion. In April of 1874, Packer arrived alone at an Indian agency near Gunnison, well-fed, carrying money and watches from the other 5. He said they had separated from him and died of starvation in the mountains. Months later, a hunter found the 5 bodies at the abandoned camp. Stacked with flesh cut from the thighs and chest, one had been shot. Packer confessed. He said he killed one in self-defense and ate the others. He was tried in Lake City, Colorado. The phrase attributed to Judge Melville Jerry became folklore. There were 7 Democrats in Hinsdale County, and you ate 5 of them. The historical version is more sober. Packer served 17 years. Fact number 5. Charles Kennedy, the man of the cabin between Elizabethtown and Taos. Around 1870, in New Mexico, Kennedy kept an isolated cabin on the road between the 2 towns, offering beds to travelers. His wife, Gregoria, was Ute. When the guest went to sleep, Kennedy killed them in bed. He took money, guns, horse, burned the body in the fireplace or buried it near the house. He operated for years without anyone suspecting, until the night his own son said too much. During dinner, a guest asked if there were many Indians in the area. Kennedy's son, still a child, answered without understanding. He told the man to smell the floor carefully, that his father had buried an Indian right under there. Kennedy exploded. He killed the guest right there. He smashed his son's head against the fireplace stone. He locked his wife in and drank until he passed out. Gregoria managed to escape and fled to Elizabethtown. Clay Allison's vigilantes killed Kennedy before the trial. Fact number 6. The Chinese Cribs of San Francisco, 1850s. During the gold rush, Chinese women were brought on ships to the West Coast. Some were tricked with promises of marriage. Others arrived chained in the ship's hold. In Chinatown, trafficking rings changed their names and placed them inside cubicles called cribs. Wooden crates with no window at street level, a grate at face height. The client paid on the sidewalk and entered. They spent the day receiving worker after worker. They did not leave. They ate, slept, and worked in the same cubicle. Those who tried to escape were beaten. Those who got sick were forgotten. The police knew about the scheme. Missionaries like Donaldina Cameron entered the houses to rescue girls, some 12, 13 years old. Local politics pretended it was Chinese commerce like any other. It was only partially dismantled after the earthquake of 1906. Fact number 7. James Miller, the deacon who killed for hire. Born in 1861 in Arkansas, raised in Texas, he attended Methodist church every Sunday. He did not drink, did not smoke, did not swear. Neighbors called him Deacon Jim. Under the long black coat, he wore a steel plate strapped to his chest. The plate saved him from several point-blank shots. People saw Miller take lead to the chest and remain standing as if nothing had happened. He worked as a hired gun. He charged hundreds of dollars per kill. He killed his brother-in-law on the porch. He killed a sheriff in Toyah. He is suspected of killing Pat Garrett, the man who brought down Billy the Kid. Actual kills, well more than 14. In 1909, after killing a marshal in Ada, Oklahoma, a mob grew tired of the court. They dragged Miller from the jail before dawn and took him to a barn. Last words before the hanging, "Let me keep the hat. I will see you all in hell." Fact number 8. John Wesley Hardin, the gunman who killed a man for the sound of his snoring. Born in Texas in 1853, son of a Methodist preacher, he killed his first man at 15. By 18, he already had a dozen kills. He claimed 44. In August of 1871, he stayed at the American House Hotel in Abilene, Kansas. The walls were thin, separated by just a plank. The guest in the next room, Charles Cougar, was sleeping. The famous version says Cougar was snoring too loud. Hardin yelled for him to stop. Cougar kept going. Hardin fired several shots through the wall. The bullets went through the plank and killed the man in his bed. The local newspaper says Cougar was sitting up reading. Either way, he died without understanding. Hardin knew Wild Bill Hickok, sheriff of Abilene, would not let this slide. He jumped out the hotel window in his undershirt, slept in a haystack, and stole a horse at dawn. He was killed with a shot in the back in El Paso, 1895. Fact number 9. Belle Starr, the bandit queen killed on an empty road. Myra Maybelle Shirley was born in 1848 in Missouri into a wealthy family. The Civil War destroyed her father's farm. By 20, she was already riding with outlaws. She married 3 times, all to criminals. She rode with Cole Younger, sheltered Jesse James in Indian Territory, and ran horse theft rings. She wore velvet, rode side saddle, and carried 2 revolvers, nicknamed the Bandit Queen. 4 husbands died violently. Sam Starr, the third, died in a shootout. Belle had already been arrested for horse theft and tried by Judge Parker in Fort Smith. Her face appeared in newspapers across Texas and Arkansas. On February 3rd, 1889, 2 days before turning 41, she was riding back from the market on the road near Eufaula. Someone was waiting. She took shotgun blasts to the back of the head, and the face. The killer was never identified. Suspect, her own son. Fact number 10. Wild Bill Hickok, the gunfighter who died for switching seats at the poker table. James Butler Hickok was the most famous gunfighter in the West. Former scout, former sheriff of Abilene. His rule, never sit with your back to the door. On August 2nd, 1876, in Deadwood, he entered the Nuttall and Mann Saloon to play poker. The chair with its back to the wall was already taken. He asked the player to switch. The man refused. He asked a second time, refused again. Hickok sat with his back to the rear door. He played a few hands, lost to a captain named Massey. He grumbled that the old man had cleaned him out. It was his last sentence. Jack McCall came in through the back and shot him in the back of the head. Hickok fell dead over the table. The cards he was holding entered legend. 2 black aces and 2 black eights. To this day, poker players call that combination the dead man's hand. Fact number 11. Elfego Baca, the 19-year-old who held off 80 cowboys for 33 hours. In October of 1884, Baca, a young Mexican-American born in Socorro, New Mexico, went to Frisco because Texan cowboys were tormenting the Hispanic population. He made a deputy badge at home, arrested a cowboy named Charlie McCarty who was shooting drunk, and took him in for trial. That was the day things escalated for good. McCarty's friends started gathering outside the station. More cowboys kept arriving through the night. When Baca counted, there were about 80 armed men wanting his head. Baca ran to a jacal, a flimsy hut made of adobe and sticks, and locked himself inside with 2 revolvers. The standoff lasted 33 hours. The cowboys fired approximately 4,000 rounds at the jacal. They tried dynamite. They tried fire. Baca shot back from a hole in the floor. He came out alive. A broom beside him had 8 bullets embedded in it. Fact number 12. Rattlesnake Dick, the gold that is still buried in the mountain. Richard Barter, a Canadian of British descent, arrived in California during the gold rush at 20 years old. He did not find gold. He became an outlaw. The nickname came from the gulch where he mined. In 1856, he planned the biggest heist of his career. He sent George Skinner and 3 accomplices to intercept a mule train carrying gold from the Eureka Mining Company, crossing the Trinity Mountains. Skinner took $80,000 without firing a shot. The problem came when it was time to haul it. The mules were exhausted. Skinner buried about $40,000 on a hillside, marked reference points, and tried to flee with the rest. He was cornered and killed before revealing the exact location. About $15,000 in gold was recovered on the hillside. The rest remains buried in the Trinity Mountains to this day. Rattlesnake Dick was killed in a shootout in 1859, at 25 years old. He took half the secret. Skinner had already taken the other half. Fact number 13. The Johnson County War. In April of 1892 in northern Wyoming, the cattle barons decided to wipe out the small ranchers they called thieves. They had a list of 70 names, among them the county sheriff and 3 commissioners. They took a private train from Cheyenne. They boarded 52 men, including 23 Texas hired guns contracted at $5 a day plus $50 per confirmed kill. They carried dynamite, rifles, and enough ammunition to kill everyone in the state. They cut the telegraph wires, surrounded a ranch called the KC, and killed the first 2 names on the list, including the leader Nate Champion. The news spread. Ranchers, merchants, and workers took up arms and surrounded the invaders. About 200 men surrounded the TA ranch. The tension grew so intense that Washington sent the army. The soldiers arrived not to protect the ranchers, but to escort the rich men out safely. Not a single invader was convicted. Fact number 14. Big Nose Kate, the woman who set a town on fire to free Doc Holliday. Mary Catherine Horney was born in Hungary in 1850. Orphaned in Iowa, she ran away from an adoptive family. She worked as a dancer, prostitute, and brothel owner across the South. She met John Henry Doc Holliday in Fort Griffin, Texas, and the 2 became partners for years to come. They fought, separated, got back together. Doc was a dentist, gambler, and tuberculosis patient. In 1877 in Texas, he was arrested after a brawl. A man died. A mob formed to carry out rope justice before the trial. The jail was flimsy. Kate knew that if she waited, Doc would be lynched. She set fire to a shed near the jail. The town ran to put out the flames before taking to the street. Meanwhile, Kate entered the station armed, held the guard at gunpoint, and freed Doc Holliday. The 2 fled on horseback into the early morning. Few men would have had the courage this woman had alone. They remained partners with fights for more than a decade. Fact number 15. Birdcage. Theater, the theater that never closed for 8 years. Opened on December 25th, 1881 in Tombstone, Arizona, at the height of the Silver Rush. The owner, William Hutchinson, wanted to run a respectable variety theater. It became something else. In the main hall, suspended from the ceiling in 2 rows, hung 14 small curtained booths, the cages. They were cubicles where prostitutes served clients while the show went on down on the stage below. You paid admission and chose. It operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 8 straight years without closing a single night. Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, Bat Masterson, they all passed through. A poker game in the basement supposedly lasted 8 years. The walls of the birdcage still hold about 120 bullet holes. 26 people were killed inside the building in fights, jealous rages, and gambling debts. When the silver mines flooded in 1889, the place closed. It reopened as a museum later. Fact number 16. Bass Reeves, the black marshal who may have inspired the Lone Ranger. Born into slavery in Arkansas in 1838, he escaped during the Civil War to Indian Territory, where he learned several native languages and lived for years among the Cherokee and Creek. In 1875, Judge Isaac Parker hired him as a federal deputy marshal. He was the first black man to wear the badge west of the Mississippi. He worked 32 straight years without ever being wounded. Official tally, 3,000 arrests and 14 kills in self-defense. Reeves could not read. He memorized every warrant. He used disguises, dressed in the rags of a drunk cowboy to get close to fugitives. He carried handcuffs on one side of his belt and a Bible on the other. In one arrest, he brought his own son in chains to Fort Smith. Decades after Reeves died, the series The Lone Ranger was created in Detroit, a masked white man with an indigenous companion. Several historians argue the inspiration came from Reeves. Others disagree. Reeves existed, and he did all of it. Fact number 17. Charlie Parkhurst, the stagecoach driver who was a woman. Charlotte Parkhurst was born in 1812 in New Hampshire in an orphanage. She ran away dressed as a boy at 12 years old. She never wore women's clothing again. She learned to break horses on the East Coast. She moved to California in 1851 and became one of the most well-known stagecoach drivers in the state. She drank whiskey, chewed tobacco, played poker, and swore like any other driver. A horse kick blinded her left eye. She wore a patch. She drove for 30 years between Santa Cruz and San Jose, on roads with bandits and cliffs. She killed a robber in an ambush. On November 3rd, 1868, she registered to vote in the presidential election, 52 years before women's suffrage. Charlie died of tongue cancer in December of 1879 in a cabin near Watsonville. When the undertaker went to prepare the body, he discovered that Charlie was, in fact, Charlotte. Fact number 18. The diamond hoax, the con that fooled the American banking system. In 1872, two cousins from Kentucky, Philip Arnold and John Slack, showed up in San Francisco with a bag full of rough diamonds. They said they had found a field out west. The bankers took the bait. Arnold had worked at a diamond drilling company and stolen industrial stones. He bought more in London. He sprinkled everything on an isolated plateau in Colorado and took the investors to the site blindfolded. The men dug into the ground and found diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and sapphires. They returned convinced. Investors like Charles Tiffany and General Benjamin Butler put in millions in shares. It was one of the biggest financial cons of the century. The hired engineer, Henry Janin, bumped into the government geologist, Clarence King, by chance on a train in California. King went to the site, noticed the stones were in absurd spots in the soil, and exposed the fraud. In November of 1872, it went public. Fact number 19. Judge Isaac C. Parker, the hanging judge. In 1875, Parker took over the federal court in Fort Smith, Arkansas, responsible for the lawless Indian Territory. He was 36 years old. President Grant sent him to end the disorder. He served for 21 years. He presided over approximately 13,000 cases. He sentenced roughly 160 men to death by hanging. About 79 were actually hanged in the courtyard. The executioner, George Malladon, became known as the Prince of Hangmen. Malladon weighed the ropes for each condemned man. On mass execution days, he hanged 6 men at the same time on the same gallows. Crowds took the train to watch. They sold pamphlets with the condemned man's biography at the entrance of the yard. Despite the nickname hanging judge, Parker was considered humane by the standards of the era. He slept poorly, said every sentence weighed on his stomach. He approved Bass Reeves and other black and indigenous marshals. He died in 1896 after losing jurisdiction. Fact number 20. Stagecoach Mary, the former slave who carried the mail in Montana. Mary Fields was born into slavery in Tennessee around 1832. Freed after the Civil War, she ended up working for Ursuline nuns. In 1885, she moved to Montana. She stood over 6 feet tall, weighed close to 200 pounds, smoked cigars, drank whiskey, went around armed, and brawled in saloons. She was expelled from the mission by the bishop, who found her presence inappropriate for nuns. She needed to figure out life on her own. In 1895, at 63 years old, she won a postal contract for an independent route in Cascade, Montana. She was the first black woman to receive a star route. She drove a carriage with 6 horses, shotgun on the seat, a mule named Moses on a leash. For 8 years, she faced wolves, robbers, and blizzards. When the snow stopped the carriage, she crossed the route on foot with the mail sacks on her back. She never missed a delivery. Cascade closed its schools on her birthday. She died in 1914. Fact number 21. The Reno brothers and the first train robbery in American history. On October 6, 1866, in Jackson County, Indiana, 2 brothers named John and Simeon Reno had an idea that changed American crime. Before that, trains were stopped. The Renos were the first to stop a moving train in an empty stretch far from any authority. They jumped into a car of the Ohio and Mississippi Railroad, overpowered the safe attendant, and threw the safe out the moving door. They took about $13,000, a fortune at the time. They created the model that Jesse James, Frank James, Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid, and dozens of others would copy for decades across the West. The Pinkertons were hired to hunt them all. In July of 1868, John was caught. Frank, William, and Simeon were captured in Minnesota. On December 12, 1868, a masked mob stormed the jail in New Albany, Indiana, and hanged the 3 Renos from the bars of a staircase. Fact number 22. Black Bart, the robber who wrote poetry and was afraid of horses. Charles Bowles, former Union soldier, failed miner, wanted revenge specifically on Wells Fargo, a company he accused of having ruined his mine. Starting in 1875, he always traveled on foot. He walked 25 miles to the ambush point. He wore an overcoat, a flour sack mask, and carried a double-barreled shotgun. The shotgun was never fired, almost certainly not even loaded. Over 8 years, he robbed 28 Wells Fargo stagecoaches. He never killed anyone. He was polite to drivers and passengers and refused to take anything from the passengers. In 2 robberies, he left poems in the empty, safe-signed Black Bart, the poet. He was caught in 1883 because of a ridiculous detail. He left a handkerchief near the site of the last robbery. The handkerchief had a laundry mark. Wells Fargo traced the mark to San Francisco. He served 4 years and disappeared into anonymity. Fact number 23, the Pinkertons, the private army of the barons. Alan Pinkerton, a Scottish immigrant, founded the agency in Chicago in 1850. He started as a railroad detective. He allegedly saved Abraham Lincoln from an assassination attempt in 1861. After that, it became something else. The barons of steel, railroads, mines, and oil discovered it was cheaper to rent a private army than to wait for the police. The Pinkertons offered everything. Detectives infiltrated into unions, strike-breaking with clubs and revolvers. In July of 1892, in Pennsylvania, Carnegie Steel hired 300 Pinkerton men to invade the Homestead plant and break a strike. The men arrived by boat on the Monongahela River at dawn. The strikers were waiting on the bank. It was a 12-hour shootout. 7 strikers and 3 Pinkerton men died. Carnegie won the strike in the end, with help from the National Guard. The United States saw that capital had its own army. The Pinkertons still exist today. Fact number 24. Sitting Bull, the Lakota chief who annihilated Custer and became a show attraction. On June 25, 1876, at Little Bighorn, Montana, Sitting Bull led the Lakota Cheyenne coalition that destroyed the 7th Cavalry of Lieutenant Colonel Custer. Custer died along with 267 of his men in one of the worst military defeats in American history. But the army hunted the Lakota communities in the months that followed. Sitting Bull fled to Canada, spending 4 years in exile. He surrendered in 1881, starving. He was imprisoned at Fort Randall, transferred to the Standing Rock Reservation. In 1885, William Buffalo Bill Cody invited him to tour with his show. He earned $50 a week, plus whatever he made selling photos. The warrior who had humiliated the army now rode in arenas for paying crowds that booed him. In 4 months, he quit and returned to the reservation. On December 15, 1890, he was killed on the reservation by Indian police. Fact number 25. Pearl Hart, the last stagecoach robber. Pearl Taylor was born in 1871 in Canada into a wealthy family. She ran away from home at 16 with a gambler named Frederick Hart, who beat her. She saw Buffalo Bill's show in Chicago and was captivated. She left her children with her mother and went to Arizona. In 1899, she received a letter saying her mother was ill. Pearl did not have a cent. Her partner Joe Boot suggested the solution: rob a stagecoach. On May 30th, she cut her hair and dressed as a man. The two stopped the stagecoach between Globe and Florence. They took $431 from the passengers. Pearl returned $1 to each victim to buy food. She was arrested 3 days later, lost in the desert. New York newspapers sent reporters. At the trial, she said, "I shall not submit to a law in which my sex had no voice in making." She was sentenced to 5 years. She served just over 1 year in Yuma. She was released, claiming to be pregnant. It was the last stagecoach robbery in the United States. Fact number 26, bounty hunters and the standing corpse. Before photography, the bounty hunter who killed a fugitive needed to drag the body to town to collect the reward. In hot climates, days of travel with a decomposing corpse on a horse. When the camera arrived in the West in the 1860s and 1870s, it changed the job. The hunter could bring photographic proof to the nearest sheriff. But the corpse needed to look recognizable in the image. Lying on the ground, turned over, it did not work. A macabre practice emerged. They propped the corpse upright against a wall, a door, or a crate, dressed in the clothes it was killed in. Sometimes they tied the chin so the mouth would not fall open. Sometimes they forced the eyes open. The photographer needed to be fast. The body started to deteriorate shortly after death. Photographs of dead fugitives became a genre of their own. Jesse James, and decades later Bonnie and Clyde, displayed standing against the wall as if they were alive. Fact number 27. Geronimo, from feared guerrilla fighter to photo seller at fairs. Goyali, known to the Mexicans as Geronimo, was born around 1829. In 1851, Mexican soldiers attacked his camp. They killed his mother, his wife, and 3 children. Geronimo never stopped fighting. For more than 25 years, with 30 to 40 Apache warriors, he evaded American and Mexican troops, crossing the border on horseback. The United States sent as many as 5,000 soldiers just to hunt him. In September of 1886, on the Arizona-Mexico border, Geronimo surrendered for the last time. He was the last indigenous leader still at war with the United States. They sent him and his band to prison in Florida, then to Oklahoma. In old age, he became a star. In 1905, he rode in Theodore Roosevelt's inauguration parade. He appeared at fairs in Omaha and St. Louis. He sold buttons from his own shirt, hats, and autographed photos. He asked to return and die in Arizona. He was denied. Fact number 28. Wild West whiskey, the water that caught fire. In the saloons of mining towns and railroad camps, what was sold as whiskey had little relation to today's bourbon. Bourbon existed, but it was expensive and rare outside the cities. What circulated in most saloons was a homemade mix: pure grain alcohol, well water, burned sugar for color, chewing tobacco for bitterness. Sometimes they added gunpowder, pepper, or snake oil for punch. Sellers poured a measure into the campfire to prove its strength. If it caught fire, it was considered good. Hence the nickname given by the indigenous peoples who traded pelts for the drink, firewater. Frontier doctors prescribed it as medicine. Cowboys said they would rather face a duel than endure the hangover from a night on that stuff. Blindness, deafness, paralysis, and memory loss were effects documented by doctors. In some saloons, the cheapest glass cost 5 cents. Whoever walked out of there walked out changed. Fact number 29. Scalping, and the official market paid for by governments. Hollywood showed scalping as an indigenous ritual. The history is more complicated. The practice existed among some native peoples before the Europeans in a ceremonial context. British, French, and Dutch colonial governments began paying cash bounties for indigenous scalps. Pennsylvania in 1756 offered $130 in silver for the scalp of an adult Delaware man, $50 for a woman or child. Other states followed. The official market created professional scalp hunters, white men, mixed-race men, indigenous people from other tribes. They attacked villages, killed women and children, brought the scalps to the county seat, and collected the silver. It lasted decades. During the Civil War, William Anderson, known as Bloody Bill, commanded Confederate guerrillas in Missouri. He hung Union soldiers' scalps from his horse's harness. He was killed in an ambush in 1864 at 24 years old. His men would go on to form the Jesse James Gang. Fact number 30. The United States Army camels in the Texas desert. In 1855, Secretary of War Jefferson Davis authorized an absurd experiment: importing camels from the Middle East to use as pack animals in the Southwest. Horses and mules were suffering. In May of 1856, the ship USS Supply docked in Indianola, Texas, with 34 camels purchased from Turkey, Egypt, and Tunisia. A year later, 41 more. The animals were taken to Camp Verde in central Texas and trained for military hauling. They worked. They withstood the heat, needed little water, and carried up to about 600 pounds, 3 times more than a mule. The problem was everything else. They spat at the soldiers, bit, and smelled horrible. The army horses panicked around them. The Civil War came in 1861. The experiment was forgotten. Camp Verde fell into Confederate hands. The camels were sold at auction, set loose, or stolen. For decades, travelers in Arizona swore they had seen wild camels on the horizon. Fact number 31. The black cowboys that Hollywood erased. The image the movie sold is the lone white man with a tilted hat. Historians estimate that between 1865 and 1885, 1 in every 4 cowboys on the Great Texas Trails was a black man. Many were formerly enslaved people who already knew cattle handling. The skills of driving, branding, and braking had been learned in slavery. When the Texas owners left to fight in the Civil War, the enslaved kept the work going. After emancipation, these men had a trade. They drove herds along trails like the Chisholm and the Goodnight Loving, covering thousands of miles from Texas to Kansas, Wyoming, and Montana. Nat Love, Bose Eichert, Bill Pickett, others without a name. When the movies decided to turn the cowboy into an American myth, they erased these men. Films with John Wayne, Gary Cooper, Clint Eastwood. A black cowboy almost never appeared. Bill Pickett invented bulldogging and rodeo. The credit went to a white actor. Fact number 32. Mattie Silks, the millionaire businesswoman of Denver. Martha Reddy was born in 1846 in Pennsylvania, raised in Indiana. She left home as a teenager. By 19, she was already running a brothel in Springfield, Illinois. She always led. She was always the madam. She moved to Colorado during the silver boom. In 1876, she bought her first brothel in Denver on Holiday Street, paying $13,000 in cash. It was a fortune. A 3-story mansion, 27 rooms, an orchestra in the parlor, dresses from Paris. She ran the place for more than 20 years like an executive. Disciplined staff, clear rules, books closed every night, a list of regular clients she never showed to anyone. Anyone who misbehaved was removed from the list for good. When her rival Jenny Rogers died in 1909, Mattie bought the House of Mirrors, the most luxurious brothel in the city. She walked through the streets of Denver wearing expensive jewelry. Newspapers tried to block photos of her, alleging encouragement of indecency. The money kept coming in. Fact number 33. Laura Bullion, the thorny rose of the Wild Bunch. Born around 1876 in Texas, daughter of a cowboy who turned outlaw, Laura grew up in the middle of the criminal world. She met the Carver brothers and the Kilpatricks as a child, when her father received them at home. At 15, she began an affair with William News Carver, one of the most wanted outlaws in the Southwest. Through the same network, she met Ben Kilpatrick, the tall Texan, and the others from what would become the Wild Bunch of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Other women orbited the Wild Bunch, like Etta Place. Laura was the only one who actively participated in the crimes. She cut her hair short, dressed as a man, carried a revolver, forged signatures, and sold stolen goods. Nickname, the Thorny Rose. In November of 1901, she was arrested in St. Louis along with Ben Kilpatrick. Her suitcase was full of bills stolen in a train robbery in Montana. She served 3 years. She got out in 1905, left the past behind. She worked as a housekeeper in Memphis. She died in 1961. Fact number 34. Eleonora Dumont, the Madame Mustache who ruled the blackjack tables. She appeared in Nevada City, California in 1854 in her early 20s. She claimed to be French with a Parisian accent. She sat down at blackjack and started winning. Within a few months, she opened her own parlor. She called it 21, the game of 21 in French. Polite, well-dressed, she offered free champagne to clients. She did not allow swearing at the table, did not allow drunkenness. The miners loved it. The house was full every night. When the gold in Nevada City dried up, she moved to another town. Body, Virginia City, Eureka, Pioche, always setting up a parlor, always at the table. Over the years, a dark mustache grew on her face above the lip. The nickname stuck, Madame Mustache. In September of 1879, in Bodie, she fell into a trap. A pair of cheating gamblers cleaned her out in a single night. She woke up with nothing from what she had built over 25 years. She walked out of town at dawn with a vial of morphine. She was found dead on the road. Fact number 35. Alice Ivers, Poker Alice. She was born in England in 1851 and moved to the United States as a child. She married young to a mining engineer in Lake City who died in an explosion at the mine. Alice was left with no money. She started going to saloons to pass the time. She learned poker by watching the players. She had a good head for numbers. Within a few months, she turned professional. She learned at the saloon of Bob Ford, the man who killed Jesse James. Alice had a cold style. She did not drink while playing. She read the opponent by the face. She bet with clockmaker precision. In a single night in Silver City, she supposedly pocketed $6,000, more than many earned in years, cigar in her mouth, revolver on her hip. In 1913, in Sturgis, South Dakota, she was already in her 60s. A drunken soldier entered her establishment, threatening customers. Alice drew her revolver and fired. She was acquitted on grounds of self-defense. She died in 1930 at 79 years old at home. Fact number 36. The Gold Rush, 9 men for every woman. In January of 1848, James Marshal found gold nuggets at a sawmill in Sutter's Mill. The news spread around the world. In 2 years, approximately 300,000 people went to California. Almost all were men. In 1850, the California census recorded about 90% male population. In some mining towns, the ratio reached 9 men for every woman. In others, 20 to 1. The scarcity was visible on any road. Saloon owners saw an opportunity. They hired women to sing, dance, and chat with clients. The hurdy-gurdy girls, named after the hand organ used in the dances. The more the client talked, the more whiskey he ordered, the more money went to the register. Many of these women earned more than teachers on the East Coast. Some started their own businesses. Some saved, sent money to their families, and returned to the East wealthy years later. Anyone who mistreated these women could catch a bullet in the street. Fact number 37. The Pony Express, the biggest logistical gamble of the Wild West. On April 3, 1860, the first Pony Express mail carrier left St. Joseph, Missouri, heading for Sacramento, California. More than 1,900 miles. The promise, deliver in 10 days. It operated with about 80 riders, many of them teenagers. The recruitment notice asked for thin, strong young men under 18, willing to risk their lives. It preferred orphans. They changed horses every 12 miles at 184 stations. They slept little. They ate less. They faced Paiute attacks, snowstorms in the Sierras, and outlaws. William Buffalo Bill Cody claimed to have ridden about 317 miles without stopping for the Pony Express. Some historians doubt the number. But the service lasted only 18 months. From April of 1860 to October of 1861, the owners lost more than $200,000. What killed the Pony Express was not a lack of courage. It was a copper wire. The telegraph was completed. 2 days later, they announced the end. Fact number 38. Deadwood, 1876. In July of 1876, when gold was discovered in the Black Hills, thousands invaded South Dakota. The Deadwood camp grew within months. Canvas tents, wooden shacks, mud in the streets, corpses in the alleys. Wild Bill Hickok arrived in July. Calamity Jane, too. The brothels came along. In canvas tents, stuck to saloons, women worked for about $50 per client. Some arrived from town to town expelled. Some were children. The client entered the tent. The curtain closed. Within minutes, he left. There was no hot water, no doctor, no contraception, no prevention. Diseases spread at an absurd speed. syphilis without antibiotics, gonorrhea without antibiotics, smallpox, cholera. At Mount Moriah Cemetery, there are graves marked only as Madam or Soiled Dove. The infirmary in the cemetery saw more traffic than the main street after any shootout. Hollywood later filmed Deadwood as a romantic western. The real thing was an open sewer. Fact number 39. Cowboy bandanas, the cloth that saved lives and hid faces. Hollywood showed the bandana as an accessory. The real function of the colorful cloth tied around the neck was survival. Driving cattle was one of the dirtiest jobs in the world. 8,000 head of cattle walking together kicked up walls of dust that covered miles. The cowboy spent weeks breathing that. Without the bandana pulled up over the face, the lungs could not take it. A basic item, alongside the saddle and the revolver. It had 1,000 secondary uses. It covered the neck against the sun. It served as an improvised cap in the cold. It filtered muddy water before drinking. It grabbed a hot pot from the campfire. It blindfolded a nervous horse. It served as a tourniquet on a serious wound, a bandage, a gun rag. And when pulled up over the nose, the same cloth that protected the worker hid the face of the robber. Jesse James, Butch Cassidy, and hundreds of others used it to conceal their identity during robberies. By day, it saved lungs. At night, it became a mask. Fact number 40. Dodge City, the silent syphilis of the Wild West. In the mid-1870s, Dodge City, Kansas, became the endpoint of the Chisholm Trail. It was where Texas herds were driven for shipment by train to the American East. Cowboys arrived exhausted after months on the trail, pay in hand starved for saloons, brothels, and gambling. Wyatt Earp was assistant sheriff, Bat Masterson, Doc Holliday, Wild Bill Hickok all passed through. Without antibiotics, syphilis became a silent epidemic. Cowboys caught it, went back to the trail, spread it, and returned to town the following year. Many ignored the symptoms until the disease attacked the brain. By then, they were seeing things, hearing things. Doctors had terminal patients locked in back rooms. Sheriffs ordered quarantines on houses of ill repute. Regular police raids, weekly inspection of the women in the industry. What the public in Dodge did not see appeared in reports. People with facial lesions, isolated in rooms with no windows, waiting. Fact number 41. The Hell on Wheels, the brothel towns of the railroad. Between 1865 and 1869, the Union Pacific pushed westward building the Transcontinental Railroad. The workers numbered in the thousands. Former soldiers, Irish, Chinese, all working 12 to 14-hour shifts. At every point where the work stopped, a makeshift town sprang up within hours. Saloon, gambling hall, brothel, pawn shop, all at once. When the work advanced, the town was torn down and rebuilt 60 miles ahead. Nickname? Hell on Wheels. In some stretches, freight cars were converted into mobile brothels. A bed, a curtain, quick service between shifts. The women followed the construction. They negotiated prices and protection with the foreman and the makeshift sheriff of the town. Officially, the Union Pacific had nothing to do with it. Under the surface, everyone knew that without the Hell on Wheels, the workers would flee the job. On May 10, 1869, with the last spike at Promontory Summit, the ephemeral towns vanished. Fact number 42. Fanny Porter, the madam who hid the Wild Bunch. Fanny arrived in San Antonio, Texas in the mid-1890s, a young British immigrant somewhere in her 20s. Within months, she set up a house on the corner of Durango and San Saba streets. It was the most luxurious house in the city. Absolute discretion. Fanny had strict rules. Anyone who caused trouble did not come back. Anyone who talked about a client outside the house did not come back either. The clients included senators, judges, bankers, and well-known journalists. When the Wild Bunch of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid needed to disappear, they came to Fanny's house. There they rested, planned the next heist. It was in that house that Harry Longabaugh, the Sundance Kid, met Etta Place. Laura Bullion passed through too. Fanny was never arrested. When the Pinkertons came knocking in 1901, looking for Wild Bunch leads, she denied everything. She received an undercover detective, served whiskey, and sent him away without a single useful word. Any paper linking names to crimes vanished. She died wealthy in 1940.